Welcome to Hello Houston. Coming up this hour, we dive into the top stories of the day. David Richardson, the head of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, says that he had not been aware that the U.S. has a hurricane season during an operational briefing. I'm Ernie Manous.
And I'm Celestia Sherman. We'll also discuss how AI could affect U.S. Mexico trade and what it could mean for you.
And at Frank Billingsley Plus, we'll learn about which endangered species the Houston Zoo is working to save with their Director of Animal Care, Tarah Cornelius.
And as Ernie, Frank, and I discuss the top headlines of the day, we want your thoughts, your questions, and concerns. Give us a call or send us a text at 713-440-8870, or you can also email us at talk@hellohouston.org.
Hello Houston is made possible in part by founding sponsors John Bradshaw and Kathy Sanders, and by gifts from listeners like you.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. The White House is turning up the pressure on Senate Republicans to approve a massive budget bill that narrowly passed the House last month. NPR's Tamara Keith reports the legislation slashes federal spending and extends tax cuts passed during President Trump's first term in office.
There are the usual lengthy social media posts, but Trump is also picking up the phone to push for what he's calling the one big beautiful bill. A senior White House official tells NPR an all-out advocacy effort is underway to get Republican senators to support the sweeping legislation already passed by the House without making too many changes. The official, who was not authorized to speak on the record, said there's not a lot of room to maneuver because it passed so narrowly in the House. The official said to expect a succession of big names from the administration up on the Hill making the case. Tamara Keith, NPR News.
Jewish groups across the United States are speaking out about Sunday's assault on peaceful protesters marching for the release of Israeli hostages held by Hamas. NPR's Jason DeRose reports they're raising concerns about the rise in anti-Semitic attacks.
The attack on the March for Their Lives event on Sunday in Boulder, along with the killings at the Jewish Museum in D.C. last month and the arson attack on the home of the Jewish governor of Pennsylvania, have many American Jews on edge. Amy Spitalnik with the Jewish Public Affairs Council says there's a need for more than just the fortifying of synagogues and Jewish community centers.
But investment in things like hate crimes prevention grants, in building the sort of inoculation to extremism in the first place that prevents people from showing up and committing acts of violence like this one.
Spitalnik says the Boulder attack was clearly anti-Semitism, but she doesn't want to see it exploited by the Trump administration to undermine core democratic norms and the rule of law. Jason DeRose, NPR News.
International forecasters are warning of slower economic growth in the United States and around the world. NPR's Scott Horsley reports tariffs are partly to blame.
A new forecast from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development projects the U.S. economy will grow just 1.6% this year, down from 2.8% last year. The OECD says President Trump's trade war is also weighing on global growth. Economic worries have been very good for Dollar General as anxious customers go hunting for bargains at the discount retailer. Dollar General's most recent quarterly sales hit a record, topping $10 billion. The chain reported better than expected quarterly profits and raised its earnings forecast for the full year. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
This is NPR News.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Gabrielle Dawkins. Last week, Texas lawmakers passed a bill requiring more school staff to receive CPR and defibrillator training. News 88.7's Shani Chong tells us the bill was passed in honor of an HISD student who died last year of a medical emergency.
At the time of Landon Payton's death, the AED in the Marshall Middle School gym was reportedly not working properly. State lawmakers want to change that. In addition to more training, the bill passed requires schools to develop a cardiac emergency response plan. On Friday, legislators added an amendment to name Senate Bill 865 the Landon Payton Act. State Representative Christina Morales represents the Marshall Middle School area.
So now when you say Landon's Law, it's not just this bill, but it's our promise that we're taking kids' safety seriously.
The Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences cites the cause of Payton's death as undetermined. Morales says the family is still waiting for an autopsy report expected next week. I'm Shawnee Chong, News 88.7.
Houston ISD will be under state control for at least 2 more years. The Texas Education Agency made the announcement Monday. Commissioner Mike Morath is also replacing 4 of the 9 HISD board members he installed in 2023. Here's Danny Hernandez, an elected trustee without decision-making power.
Those 4 board members were the ones asking more questions about what is going on in HISD and, wanted to get information out to the community.
Hernandez says she hopes the new members seek community input. With hurricane season comes the arrival of Saharan dust. The National Weather Service says we can possibly expect to see hazy skies and reduced air quality can be expected later this work week. The clouds of dust travel thousands of miles across the Atlantic Ocean. Right now on the UH campus, it's currently 86 degrees and mostly sunny. I'm Gabrielle Dawkins, News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive, with small business insurance for protecting a variety of business types with multiple coverage options, designed to fit business owners' needs. More about small business insurance is at progressivecommercial.com.
Live from the University of Houston, it's Hello Houston, an open forum on today's biggest stories affecting Houston and beyond. Call now, 713-440-8870, or let us know your thoughts on today's topics by emailing us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now here's your host for Hello Houston, Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
Hello, Houston.
Hello, Houston. We're in a mood today.
Oh, we have a lot to say.
I can tell. You were just talking about drinking caffeine, and today you didn't have your caffeine, which should be a relief to all of us, but you did something else.
I just had a little natural energy drink, that's all.
What does that mean? Natural from what? Like a coconut? I mean, where do you get this natural energy drink?
It's this, I'm not here to like endorse anything, but there are energy drinks that are more chemically based, and then there are some that have more like, I don't know, vitamins and things like that.
I drink basically vegetarian protein drinks.
Vegetarian.
Well, I mean, they're made out of plant protein as opposed to animal protein.
Or like whey protein
right.
or pea protein.
And the reason I do that is because the whey protein sort of coagulates in your throat and you go,
yeah.
And that's the only reason. Because when I was on Channel 2, I was just doing the 3, the 4, the 5, the 6, and I was like, I got to get a protein drink
I have to do something.
but I got to keep my voice from being too raspy.
Yes.
So anyway, that's how that started.
See,
I don't know how I went
whenever
off on
I
that.
was a producer in commercial news, I worked evening news, and I remember when I first started, I'd bring in my lunch, my green juice, all my things. By the end of it, I was popping Red Bulls. I was eating chips.
Yeah, no. I actually went for 2.5 years, no caffeine.
How did that work for you?
I was really sick and I had a horrible headache, and I thought this is the time to stop drinking caffeine because I won't get the caffeine headache because I've already got a headache. So I did it. And in about a day and a half, the headache was gone, and I went 2.5 years without it. And I felt great because I was really way over the caffeines.
According to 23andMe, because I did my DNA everywhere, I'm not really affected by caffeine. In terms of it doesn't keep me up. In fact, I could drink 3 cups of coffee and take a nap.
Really?
Yeah.
See, I don't need 23andMe to tell me. I take sips of different things, and I am like, bing, bing, bing.
Frank, if you drank a coffee and breathed on me, I wouldn't be able to sleep that night. That's how sensitive I am to caffeine.
Really?
Yeah, I have to stop caffeine early in the day, or I don't sleep at all at night, which has nothing to do with today's show, but welcome. We're happy you're here. Remember, you can watch us on YouTube. Just go to our YouTube channel to find us. When you're there, subscribe, ring that bell. It's easy to find us on YouTube. Just look for Houston Public Media. I haven't said that in a while, so I wanted to remind folks of that. On today's show, we got a lot coming up. We're going to talk about AI. We're going to Ask the Doctor segments coming. But when you think of the doctor, you think of air quality, and there's a lot going out there in the weather.
Well, this is the time of year through about the very beginning of August that the Saharan air layer comes in, the dust, which I blogged about this. You could probably Google it. Most of the Saharan dust comes from one spot in the Sahara Desert, one spot. Now, there's other places that contribute,
So it just gets
but the
whipped up
majority
and comes all
across,
this way.
and it comes across with the trade winds. Makes its way, and it's very important to a lot of development, especially, I mean, we would not have the Amazon rainforest without that dust. It is iron rich. And speaking of DNA, this dust sort of has its own DNA. So we can tell what dust is coming from where. And so it makes you look at the Caribbean islands, and a lot of that vegetation and the rainforest in Puerto Rico, they're really fed by that iron-rich dust. But it can make the sky a little hazy. And I guess if you're super sensitive to it, if you have asthma.
Yeah, my question, what does it mean for my weekend?
Yeah, if you have upper respiratory issues, I would try to stay out of the outdoors too much, just like if there were any kind of an ozone warning, same kind of idea. But it helps suppress hurricanes. The other thing I wanted to mention is for hurricane followers, there is what we call a model cane. If you look at the American model, it wants to develop a hurricane and bring it into the Gulf by June the 20th. But it's a model cane. This happens every year.
That buttless friend saw my face.
You've got
just
the Western.
melt.
Well, you got the Western Caribbean and the Pacific and Central America and Panama and all of that. And because of all the differences between temperature and heights and winds, the model sees the spin going on and puts it over warm water. And when the model puts anything over warm water, it develops it tropically. That's what it does.
Well,
so we get these every year, but if you're watching them, don't believe it.
Okay, good. Because June 20th, we're doing our show live from Comic Palooza, which will be here that whole weekend. And all I can think is torrential rain falling down and cosplayers, not a good combination for our cities.
Well, and for today, it's just hot. You might see a quick shower here and there. But
well, you know what we will see? We will see Celeste beginning our headlines of the day.
And what a perfect way to begin with hurricanes. Speaking of hurricanes, the Federal Emergency Management Agency staffers were left quite confused and a bit stunned when the head of the disaster agency, David Richardson, said during a daily operational briefing he had not been aware the United States has a hurricane season. This is according to multiple sources. Richardson is a former Marine Corps officer and has led FEMA since early May of this year. His comment comes on the second day of hurricane season. Budget cuts to FEMA have raised concern about the agency's capacity to respond to natural disasters. It was not clear to staff whether he meant it literally as a joke or in some other context. A spokesperson for the Department of Homeland Security, FEMA's parent agency, said the comment was a joke and that FEMA is prepared for hurricane season. How do you feel about the head of the Federal Disaster Agency, FEMA, either not knowing the U.S. has a hurricane season or making a joke about not knowing that the U.S. has a hurricane season? You can give us a call at 713-440-8870 to join the conversation.
Well, he is from Detroit, if that's any defense, right? I bet he knows that Detroit has a snow season.
Yeah. Right.
Detroit doesn't get hurricanes. They don't get a lot of tornadoes, to be honest. Their severe weather is mostly fronts coming through and snowstorms. But, I think it's just he's been there a month. I don't know. Maybe he was, a lot of people don't know that the Pacific hurricane season starts on the 15th of May because they just don't think about that.
So, I think when we're looking at this, if we're going to move in the direction we're going to give him the benefit of the doubt, I would simply prefer my government leaders to sound professional and like they are prepared. This, to me, is not a joking matter. I find it actually in extreme bad form, given the area that we live in. There have been a lot of people that have experienced real devastation, have lost lives, have lost livelihoods, their homes, to hurricanes.
And they look to FEMA for help.
And they look to FEMA.
and so FEMA's saying no.
I mean, can I also say too soon? Too soon. We don't joke about that.
I don't think it was a joke. I think he sincerely didn't know. I think if you ask a lot of people in Colorado, they wouldn't know either. I think this guy, he went to college in Arkansas, in Searcy. He should have been a little familiar with southern weather. But then after that, he's been in Virginia and overseas and serving in the military his whole career. And maybe all he meant was, look, I didn't know why would we all start it on June 1? What kind of a season is that? I mean, because it it really isn't a season like, you remember the Christmas season started after Thanksgiving, and now it starts Labor Day? I mean, it changes like that. I think he was being dumb is what I think he was being.
That feels a little bit straw man to me argument in that, I mean, you are the head.
Oh, come on.
FEMA.
Look at the head of any group right now. We never know who's in charge of
bigger
what.
Issue I have is that I think, we know, there seems to be a trust issue with our government response to things. That too quickly, that was a joke. I mean, I don't trust almost anything that's said anymore because everyone is covering everything. If they said something off cover, that was a joke. No, they got caught saying it. If they didn't get caught saying it, it wouldn't have been a joke. Because it's being reported, we have to cover this.
Or the American people said it because they elected him.
Yeah.
I hear that a lot. This is what America wants.
We could all own up to the behaviors we do and the responsibility that goes with it. But to say he didn't know it was hurricane season, then I think in some ways looks poorly on the administration for picking him, and we can't do that.
But more so, not that he didn't know it was hurricanes. He didn't know we had hurricanes. That's even I think, worse. To Celeste's point, it's a very. We have PTSD around here after Hurricane Harvey. Still, I've spoken to groups.
Resonates here.
I have spoken to groups where people are crying when they ask me, please tell me we're not going to have a flood again this year. I can't do it again.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
It's a very serious psychological issue.
And when we're looking at Homeland Security, and when we're looking at cutbacks, we also want to understand where this administration is coming from. The spokesperson said under Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem and Richardson, FEMA is shifting from bloated, DC-centric deadweight to a lean, deployable disaster force that empowers state actors to provide relief for their citizens. So that is their justification for this. FEMA also recently came out and said that they will be scrapping their new plan. They will be sticking to the same plan, and they'll be returning to the same guidance as they did last year. Mm-hmm. So that is just as of this morning. That again brings up another question and concern is, well, here we are sticking to the same plan that we had last year with much slimmer and smaller departments and agencies to work with that
Manpower
plan.
And budgets have both been diminished.
Yeah.
Ask the people that have been affected in North Carolina by Helene that have been told, no, you're not getting, and that's a very Republican state. And I'm really shocked that the federal government didn't come in on white horses and help them out. But
that's a good point. And, I think it's one of those things where, again, we want to hear from you. Give us a call, 713-440-8870 on today's topics now or any of the ones coming up.
And here's one that's coming up. Texas would further cement its role in enforcing immigration laws under a bill the state legislature sent to the governor on Sunday that would require most sheriffs to cooperate with U.S. Immigration and Custom Enforcement. Governor Greg Abbott has signed support for such support for such an idea, and President Trump, whose administration could receive a big personnel boost for its mass deportation ambition if Texas joins the effort, endorsed the proposed law Friday as state lawmakers worked on the latest compromise. The version of Senate Bill 8 that lawmakers ultimately voted to send to the governor would require sheriffs who run or contract out operations of a jail to require and engage and enter engagements with ICE under a federal law that lets ICE extend limited immigration authority to local law enforcement officers. The bill would cover approximately, and I don't know why it limits it, to 234 of the state's 254 counties, according to the bill's author. Over the weekend, SB 8 received strong condemnation from some Democrats, high praise from immigration hardliners who had pushed all legislative session for a more sweeping bill, and ultimately a final green light from the GOP-dominated legislature. The Senate approved the bill 20-11 and the House 89-52. What are your thoughts on local sheriffs being required to cooperate with ICE? Call us, 713-440-8870.
I think they already were. Mm-hmm. I asked Adrian Garcia that exact question.
Yeah.
And when he was here, 2 weeks ago.
And his answer was?
Was, when we're called upon to help, we help.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think it's the concept of rogue sheriffs going off on their own, but I don't think they exist as much as we are led to believe. It's kind of a concept that I don't see happening in practice as much. But it does also interest me why only 234 out of 254, why it's not all of them. I don't understand why there's 20 that aren't. And I should look into that more.
I'm not sure. To me, this is a question of would this department feel comfortable supporting ICE? I think it's one of those things where you have to look to your officers and your department internally. We already talk about retention. We're already talking about, keeping these sheriffs and departments together. And now we're breaching into a whole other space that could essentially cause people themselves, a sheriff, to question, does this sit well with me in my work?
Is this what I signed up for?
Is this what I signed up for?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you sign up to follow orders whenever you're in the military or the police department or the sheriff's office. And so I'm sure they'll do what they're asked to do because somebody has to be in charge, somebody has to be the leader, and they're the ones that say, okay, this is what we're going to do. And so they'll do it. But yeah, they may not feel comfortable. And when you get to sheriffs policing anyway, I mean, think how hard it is for a cop to stop their aunt for a roadside offense. When you go,
I'd stop my aunt.
I know. Well, mine did.
We know that, Bernie.
In small towns, I've seen this happen where everybody grew up with Robbie the policeman. It's almost like Mayberry, and it's like it's hard for these people who are officers to really enforce the law in small towns. And this may be part of it in small towns where some of these counties are being exempted because everybody knows everybody. And they know maybe even who's there illegally and who's not. And
we want your thoughts on this very topic at 713-440-8870. Robert from Kingwood is on the line. Robert, what are your thoughts?
Well, I have two thoughts. I mean, this comment kind of goes along with the slide with the Secretary of Health who said, don't rely on me for health advice. These are people who are, one, incompetent, and two, probably have never lived through a life-threatening situation like a hurricane. But more importantly, with FEMA, this has all the hallmarks of a disaster since Trump has decided to push all federal at the state level. That's going to be who responds with no warning whatsoever. So, I mean, this has the hallmarks of, we're going to have to rely on Abbott if we have a Category 5 hurricane strike Galveston. I mean, it's just, it's like being on the Pierce elevator with the headlights on. You can see for miles. This is going to be a disaster of epic proportion. That's my comment.
Well, Robert, let me speak to Robert's point, too, that what happens every time a hurricane even enters the Gulf, the governors of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, even Texas start declaring states of emergency before the storm, before we even know where it's going to go. But they do that so they can go ahead and get on the list for FEMA help. And now, to Robert's point, it sounds like the federal government is saying, don't look to FEMA for help. You need to help yourself.
Yeah.
And we can't afford that. We, more than any of those states, can. But like I've said before, Harris County has more population than Louisiana. Right. It's a very different place here.
The FEMA question is taking off, and we've got another call at 713-440-8870. Sissy from Hobby Center, or Hobby Airport.
Hi.
There it is.
Hi there. Well, I understand from history the devastation we've experienced throughout the city. And the city does help itself. However, incoming presidents and other people who are in government should already know the value of FEMA and the value of what has happened since. And it's important to know, too, if there have been discovered flaws, those should be addressed even after the crisis.
Yeah.
And so that people can get what they need.
Well, FEMA was a disaster after Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. Remember that? And President Bush was calling him Brownie, is what he called him, the head of FEMA.
Yeah.
And that poor guy, he went through hell. He couldn't figure out what to do. You'd think, to Sissy's point, we would have learned a lot from that, and we would certainly have learned a lot from Helene in North Carolina after just last year, and we ourselves have been through so many different flood events here. Now, we expected after Ike in 2008 for all the cavalry to ride in and save us, but at the same time, Goldman Sachs folded the same weekend, and so that nobody was concerned about Texas or Houston or Bolivar. They were like, our economy just broke in half. The Texans can figure it out for themselves, and we did.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's going to happen again this year. if it happens to Texas.
Sissy, thank you for your call and for joining in. And as always, we're encouraging you to be part of the conversation, 713-440-8870. Quickly, though, Frank, from where you sit in the unique position you sat in and watching FEMA come in disaster after disaster, do you think they did it in the best possible way they could for situations that they were facing, or if there were areas that it could be fixed and changed, what would you have suggested?
Well, we had people from FEMA on our air at Channel 2 when Ike was on the way. And one of the FEMA guys told me, because I have a house in Galveston, he said, go ahead and get an account set up so you'll be first on the list. One of them. And so I did. I never needed it, but I was there. And so they were trying to help us. And when my insurance people came, they had employed a lot of adjusters, all the different insurance companies to come and try to help. But then there were the fights between windstorm and insurance companies. And, did the wind blow the transformer in such a way that it caused the fire that burned down the house? So was it a wind issue or was it the fire issue? I mean, you get into all kinds of fights with this stuff. Bottom line is, it was actually the Clinton Bush Foundation that did a lot for Texas and a lot for the country when they were really active. So there you go to basically private funding.
Yeah.
But that was they were a big help. I think FEMA was better after Katrina, certainly, and better after Ike. And I think they were there and after Ike for, a year.
Yeah. Really quickly, too, we were also talking about ICE, and at 713-440-8870, Don from Sugar Land called in. Hey, Don, what's on your mind?
The sheriff interaction with immigrants or undocumented workers is interesting, but I think we have a larger systemic problem. That is, we've got to issue worker permits to those undocumented workers who have not been convicted of a crime, because in Texas, they constitute 50% of our construction workers. Mm-hmm. And they also, of course, farm our vegetables and they run our slaughterhouses and help the elderly with all sorts of tasks. So this is just shooting ourselves in the foot, and I think our lawmakers ought to consider all of that before making these kind of decisions about just shipping off anybody wherever they can find them.
Good point, Don.
Yeah. Thank you, Don, for sharing that. As always, we're interested in everyone's point of view on these subjects and topics that we're talking about. Give us a call, 713-440-8870.
Coming up on Hello Houston, we'll look at how AI can affect U.S. Mexico trade relations. This is Hello Houston on News 88.7. Stay with us.
Did you know 80% of our funding comes from listeners like you, right here in Houston? That's why your support is so important. When you give to Houston Public Media, you're investing in trusted news and educational programming that millions depend on daily. Every dollar you give makes a difference, ensuring this public service stays strong for everyone in our community. Help us support this mission. Give today at HoustonPublicMedia.org or call 888-909-0887.
Jacinda Ardern's new memoir opens with her in a bathroom, sitting on the closed lid of the toilet, anxious.
I was waiting to find out whether or not I was going to become the Prime Minister of New Zealand, and in that moment I was also waiting to find out if I was pregnant.
I'm Mary Louise Kelly. My conversation with Ardern about her new book, A Different Kind of Power, on the next All Things Considered from NPR News.
You can hear it this afternoon at 3 o'clock. Houston Public Media brings to you PBS World, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on TV 8.6. Experience the personal connection behind the headlines with programming devoted to telling stories that humanize complex issues. PBS World helps us understand the movements, conflicts, and cultures that connect us all. PBS World on TV 8.6 and online at HoustonPublicMedia.org.
Support Houston Public Media by donating a vehicle you no longer need. We'll take it in any condition. It's free to you, easy to do, and it could mean hundreds of dollars in support. Visit HoustonPublicMedia.org/cars to learn more. Thanks.
Support comes from Broadway Bank's commercial banking team. Since 1941, committed to helping businesses with their financial needs and growth. More information available at broadway.bank/commercial. Member FDIC.
And now back to Hello Houston. Call now, 713-440-8870, or email us at talk@hellohouston.org to get your comment in on today's topics. Here's Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
When we look at artificial intelligence, we see that it is in almost every facet of our life. But when we look at it, when it comes to work and labor, how will artificial intelligence and automated labor affect U.S. Mexico relationships? That was a central question at the Baker Institute's Center for the U.S. and Mexico's inaugural symposium for its new AI Policy and Governance Initiative. The symposium was held back in February, but the key findings of the symposium, which included artificial intelligence experts from the U.S. and Latin America, were recently released by the Baker Institute. To tell us more, we welcome Rodrigo Ferreira. He's an assistant teaching professor in computer science at Rice University and a faculty scholar at the Baker Institute. If you have questions for Rodrigo about how artificial intelligence and automation will affect U.S. Mexico trade relations, give us a call now at 713-440-8870. Welcome to Hello Houston, Rodrigo.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. It's my
Well,
pleasure.
we're glad you're here. So what brought on this study to begin with?
Yes, absolutely. So last year at the Center for the U.S. and Mexico at Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy, we launched this initiative on AI policy and governance. The reason for that is that, well, AI is everywhere, right? Mm-hmm. And everybody wants us using AI all the time. And it's increasingly a marker of business development and economic success and government readiness. So at the Baker Institute, which is a top research institution on matters of foreign policy, particularly with Mexico and with Latin America, what we wanted to do was to think about these things together. Right? So at the Center for the U.S. and Mexico, for instance, there's a lot of research as it refers to immigration, labor, trade across the Americas. But how can we think about that in relationship to AI? So a very specific example that we wanted to look at was questions about AI automation and employment, right? People in the U.S. are very worried about what AI might be doing to their jobs, right? Some people have utopian fantasies about it. Some people are very concerned. But where's the gray area? Everything in between. And how does it affect people in other parts of the world? Right. So not just thinking about the future of work, but the futures of work.
So when you talk about the future of work, you're specifically talking about labor workers. Is that correct?
Well, this is the thing with AI, right? That historically there have been a lot of concerns about technology as it refers more to manual labor of sorts or manufacturing, right? The kinds of things that you could do with your hands.
So more robotics.
People historically were more concerned about robotics, right? But now, over the past few years, with recent innovations in AI, it's not just about robotics. It's also about creative work. It's also about the kind of information management work, right? So how AI can now do certain things as it refers to computation, as it refers to communication, information management. That's been raising a whole lot new questions.
So how different is this then than when we look at the Industrial Revolution? Is this like the AI revolution when it comes to workforce?
Well, some people love talking about it as the AI revolution, right? But as you point out, it's really a part of a longer history, right? And it's been part of a longer history about these kinds of fears, which have brought up obviously increased production and wealth and resources. But the concerns on the other side are also genuine, right? In that, well, as people's jobs are automated and more wealth and resources are produced, well, are those wealth and resources then trickling back down to those workers?
Well, I always hear that it's not so much AI that's going to replace workers. It's the person who understands AI that's going to replace that worker.
Yeah.
So is the education to people in Latin America and Mexico about AI, is that part of what's lacking?
Well, it's a complicated question because, again, these technologies have different effects in different parts of the world. So, for instance, one of the cases that we looked at was if you go back a few years and you think about on-demand gig work platforms, so like Uber, for instance, right? Something like that, which is obviously uses AI and algorithmic management to create all these recommendations, right? You have something like that in Latin America. And from a certain perspective, as it is here in the United States, it's like, well, this is great. This is creating economic opportunities for employment, right? Even as Uber puts it, you could be your own boss. So it sounds like a very attractive form of employment.
And in any city. I've used Uber in Mexico City. I've used it in Puerto Vallarta, Cancun. I mean, it's all over Mexico.
Yes, absolutely. Well, in Cancun, there's been some interesting complexities, which I can talk about.
Okay, well, that's a different river we'll go down. But go ahead. Good.
But what's happened, for instance, is that in Mexico, in Latin America, these kinds of platforms have been adopted to a much larger percentage that they have here in the United States, not as an additional form of income, but as a kind of full-time employment. And the consequences of that are, again, on the one hand, there's increased economic opportunities and employment, but on the other hand, in many countries in Latin America, you don't get some of the safety net that you get here in the United States. Mm-hmm. So as it refers to medical benefits, for instance, as it refers to unemployment benefits, for instance. So in the absence of full-time employment that can provide that for you, workers in Latin America are left off in a much more precarious situation. And, going back to the situation with Cancun, for instance, in some cases, even crime and violence and discrimination.
I'm sorry.
No,
I was going to say, so with AI coming into the marketplace as it has, are there unique challenges that Mexico would be facing that the U.S. wouldn't? Or are we all dealing with very similar problems and maybe our approaches of how we're dealing with them are different?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think both situations are true, right? In that, as it stands right now, there's a lot of questions as to exactly how AI will impact labor markets across the world, right? Mm-hmm. But we also know, and this is something that scholars love talking about, that AI is really neither artificial nor intelligent.
Well, shot that one down.
Well, again, to me, this is the interesting dynamics, right? Because, what defines something being artificial? It's really people's work that is putting this together, right? And it's material resources that are needed to build technologies. Right. A lot of natural resources go into the everyday usage of AI, right? And again, we talk about intelligence insofar as it's able to do certain things very well, obviously not able to do a lot of things, right?
You're listening to Hello Houston. We're speaking with Rodrigo Ferreira. I apologize. I think I just cut you off. I thought you were pausing. Rodrigo Ferreira is an assistant teaching professor in computer science at Rice University. We're talking about AI and how it affects labor and working relationships between the U.S. and Mexico. You can join the conversation at 713-440-8870. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, can you continue along the line about where the differences or the uniquenesses between the U.S. and Mexico happen in the AI world?
Yes. Okay, so this is part of what we're looking at, right? Because as I've said, there have been some historical differences as it refers to robotics. So there, for instance, people were expecting a lot of jobs in Latin America to be overtaken by robots. Robots ended up being more expensive, right? So again, people kept hiring the kind of cheap labor that is available in those countries, right? I mentioned already the case with on-demand gig platforms such as Uber. And now, again, what we're very interested in is understanding more of these implications as it refers to AI and to generative AI.
I want to get to the point, though, is there a unique set of circumstances that maybe Mexico faces or the U.S. faces where aren't similar, or are they the same issues we face?
Yes, so what we're encountering so far in Latin America is that the high-skilled sector, right? So those kinds of creative or information management workers is a class that is relatively smaller in Latin America than what it is in the U.S., right? Mm-hmm. So whereas, again, here in the U.S., there's a lot of concerns for those people losing their jobs. In Latin America, what we're seeing is that they're actually quite benefiting from the increased productivity and wealth, right? There's so relatively less opportunities for employment for these high-skilled workers in Latin America. And again, the concentration of wealth is so much higher that these technologies are driving up inequities. And at least much more clearly so than what we're seeing in the U.S.
And so one of the challenges that you mentioned is as you are seeing these opportunities grow in Mexico, one of the issues that Latin America has that perhaps the U.S. doesn't have is the regulation and safety for these employees. Now, in Mexico, a recent reform was passed by the Senate, which aims to guarantee on-demand workers Social Security benefits, similar to those to full-time employees. You mentioned this. But is this going to work for providing it, or is it still unclear? How is that going to improve regulation and rules and safety for workers in Mexico?
Yes, so that's a big question right now, right? Because this law was only recently implemented, and again, the impetus for it is that, well, again, given the particular dynamics that you find in Mexico, given that such a large percentage of the population is engaged in this kind of gig work, that you would want to be able to provide those benefits and security to those workers, right? But again, that implies a heavier cost for the companies that then would have to provide it, right? So the big question now is, are companies going to be willing and able to do so? Or instead, are they going to retract, right? Are they going to withdraw from those markets, right? And offer less of those opportunities. On the other hand, they might pass down some of those costs to the workers themselves, right? So they might take it out of their commission, for instance, such that then the workers end up getting a lesser salary and it becomes less of an attractive opportunity. So these are some of the trade-offs that have been discussed. Again, I would think that it's very important to be able to offer those minimum securities for workers, but the companies have to cooperate.
It's one of the complaints I hear from Uber drivers here in America is that a $40 ride, they only get $7 of it, for example.
Yes.
And then Uber or whoever gets the rest of it. So that kind of an issue, if Uber was taking some of that money and actually setting up some kind of pension for those workers, that would be a positive, right?
Yes, yes.
So what do you think the good solutions to this are? Or did you just identify the problems, or did you also try to work toward the solutions?
Well, that's precisely the complex issue here at stake, right? Because, for instance, Uber's technology, right? It provides this great benefit, in theory, for workers and for riders as well, right? So in many ways, this is exactly what we would want out of technology, that it makes our life easier, more convenient, creates more opportunities for employment, etc. But as you said, the issue is that, well, a big part of the potential profits that are there are being taken in by the company, right? So either by Uber or by other companies in similar lines of business. And that, again, is going to the executives or to the investors, right? So again, what were to happen if we were to take that technology but implement it in a different structure, in a different model, where more of that goes back to the workers, right? So there's a lot of avenues for research there and possibilities in terms of thinking about how we could open up those new modes of using that same technology but in a different way.
Now, Rodrigo, we did get a text with a question that says, in a world increasingly shaped by algorithms, how do we ensure that the human values guiding AI development remain front and center so that technology serves humanity rather than the other way around?
Yes, absolutely. So that's one of the points that we actually looked at in our research report that was recently published. A lot of research historically talks about AI exposure very broadly. So whoever it is that in their work somehow uses AI, right? But again, the interest is maybe that we can look at that with a little bit more nuance, right? You can think about aspects of AI either complementing or augmenting human capacities, and other aspects replacing human capacities. So in theory, we would want technologies, we would want AI that can help us enhance those human aspects that we want, such as critical thinking, creative thinking, empathy, and communication and such, right? We don't want those to be replaced, right? We want maybe technology to help us offload other things so we can focus on what matters. So again, one of the recommendations that we're making is based upon this kind of research that draws this distinction between those two dimensions of AI, thinking about how can we isolate and identify those aspects of technology and then promote those. Right.
So based on the recommendations that you just talked, you touched on one, but there were actually 3 that the symposium developed and saw, and one of them was develop new mechanisms for policy, innovation, and experimentation.
Yes.
So how would you implement that basically on both sides of the border? When you're looking at U.S. policy and regulation, would there be some type of conversations? How does that work to ensure that if you have a U.S. company going to Mexico, that they're going to follow rules and regulations, and that if you do have workers coming over here as well, that they are going to follow rules and regulation around AI?
Yes, absolutely. So that comes from international cooperation, right? That comes from there being a dialogue between policymakers in the U.S. and in Mexico and in other parts of the world to ensure that, again, the working conditions are able to provide some kind of minimum security and benefit for workers on both sides, right?
Continue, yeah.
Well, there has to be the space for dialogue for that, right? And again, U.S. foreign policy is changing. It's been lately more difficult precisely to think about international cooperation. So this is something that we're very much encouraging, for there to be this dialogue and exchange between policymakers and researchers from the U.S., from Mexico, and from other parts of Latin America and from the world.
Are these issues you're exploring absolutely unique to AI, or are they the same issues and struggles we have with technology in general when new technologies are introduced?
Yeah. So again, I think that there are some specificities about AI, but from a broader perspective, there's a continuity between many of these technologies that we have encountered and the questions they raise. Again, for instance, when gig platforms became popular, we weren't talking so much about AI, even though they were an essential part of it, right? Talking about social media, talking about cryptocurrencies, right? Thinking about transportation automation of all sorts, right? I think that all of these questions emerge in these different areas. Right now, the locus of conversation is around AI. But again, some of these questions around labor and distribution of resources and safety and security emerge across all different technological innovations.
Also culturally, Rodrigo, in the U.S., we are very much vocal about our rights and what we believe in, and we have education through 12th grade. In Mexico and many Latin American countries, education stops in 8th grade, 6th grade. How are you making sure that labor workers understand, or what would your recommendation be to policymakers and companies in Latin America, making sure that their laborers understand their rights to understanding AI and how it is working and how it can work for them?
Yeah, so 2 points there. No, one is that obviously something that we're promoting is for higher education and higher sharing of educational resources across borders, right? So we want to make sure that people in the U.S., in Mexico, and in other parts of Latin America are able to receive the education that they need to succeed in this world, right? That includes literacy on AI and other technologies, right? But then the other point, which is what we're seeing, is that there is a large amount of high-skilled workers in Mexico and in Latin America, right? So people are coming prepared to be able to work in these areas. The problem is that either there's not enough opportunities of employment for there in Mexico or in Latin America, or they end up preferring, or up until recently, coming here to the United States, right?
Another text we got. This is such a great discussion, so there you are. I'm curious if there is a way AI could be implemented for social good.
Oh, yes. So, so that's precisely all the work that we're doing, right? Because again, to me, the most fundamental question here is, what is all this technology for, right? Obviously, we wanted to make our lives easier, to make our lives more convenient, right? We wanted to make us more productive. But again, to me, there's no point in technological innovation if the majority of the benefits and profits are going to just a very small portion of the population, right? To me, thinking about AI or technology for social good is thinking about the social, economic, and political structures that exist around these technologies to make sure that those benefits are more equitably distributed.
We did get a YouTube comment that says, I am an IT professional and use AI frequently. The one thing that needs to be understood is that the current AI can make mistakes, so it must verify the results. Also, the AI providers are constantly updating and often introducing new errors. How would you address that comment?
Yeah. So I would first of all like to compliment the person who posted that, right? Because what that demonstrates is a care for truth and a care for honesty, right? And a care for doing things with a certain degree of care and attention, right? And unfortunately, again, culture is shifting and the technology's role in culture is shifting, where oftentimes people are misled into the idea that more is necessarily better, right? So just producing things without necessarily a regard for quality or, again, for their truthfulness, right? And again, AI facilitates that. It can do a lot very quickly, right? But again, from my mind, it's very important that maybe we take a moment to reflect upon, well, why are we creating so much of these things and why? And again, how can we remain attached to those values that we care about, including truth?
If you just ask ChatGPT to write your resume, you'll see how wrong it can be.
Yeah.
But I want everyone to keep in mind, and I'm sure you'll agree on this, is that it gets better every day. It's going to learn to find those errors. This is just the first steps in the world of AI. Who knows where it's leading?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true, right? So over time, it will become more accurate, right? But I think that a bigger question there, too, is, well, what kind of communication is this? You know, when we sit here, it's not just about communicating truth, right? It's also about being able to converse, right? To empathize, to speculate together. There's so much more about communication beyond just reporting whatever is.
It'll learn it, I fear.
Now, Rodrigo, like the U.S., we recently have a new presidential administration. Mexico has a new presidential administration, Claudia Sheinbaum. Do you think that she is making and moving forward policy that will help the labor breach the labor workforce and AI in Mexico?
I know that there's a lot of interest in it, and not only at the federal level, but also at the state level. So, for instance, at an event, we had representatives from the state of Jalisco, for instance, right? And we also know that there's local Senate initiatives that are pushing forth these kinds of ideas. And in civil society, a lot of people precisely interested in better understanding AI and it having a positive impact on Mexican society and Mexican workers. So again, I think that a big question remains as to how all of these different synergies can come together, whether there will be enough government support for them, right, or whether the civil society will be the one who will have to continue to push through on them.
Wow.
Rodrigo Ferreira is an assistant teaching professor in computer science at Rice University and a faculty scholar at the Baker Institute. Rodrigo, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
After the break, we'll be talking about the endangered species being protected at the zoo. Stay with us.
It can be hard to stay informed about what's happening in our city, our state, and across the country. That's why Houston Public Media makes it easier.
Everything you hear on News 88.7 is powered by you, not advertisers. 80% of our funding comes from our Houston community.
That's what makes public media different. It's community funded and always here for you when you need it.
Join that community now at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 888-909-0887.
On the next Fresh Air, Mark Hamill. He played one of the most iconic heroes in movie history, Luke Skywalker in Star Wars. But he's also played one of the most notorious comic book villains, doing the voice of the Joker in Batman the Animated Series. He's in the new movie, The Life of Chuck, which is an adaptation of a Stephen King story. Join us.
You can hear it tonight. It's on at 8 o'clock.
Support comes from Signify Business Cash by Wells Fargo. With this business credit card, cardholders can earn rewards on business purchases with no caps or categories to track. Learn more at wellsfargo.com/signify. Terms apply.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from listeners like you and from St. Luke's Health and the St. Luke's Foundation, supporting clinical excellence, compassionate care, and a healthier future for all. More at supportstlukes.org.
Tonight on Houston Public Media TV8, celebrate Ken Burns' landmark series, The Civil War, with an in-depth overview of the iconic documentary. Go behind the scenes with video clips and interviews. Tonight at 9 on Houston Public Media TV8.
Support comes from GiveMeTheVin.com. purchasing vehicles online with the VIN or license plate and photos, or by bringing the vehicle to Houston area offices. Details at givemethevin.com.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on any of today's topics, call 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now back to Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
All right, did you know there are over 16,000 species currently listed as endangered by the International Union for Conservation of Nature? I know, that's a lot.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. The Houston Zoo is involved in the conservation of several endangered species within its own facility, as well as through working with partners from around the world. And joining us now to tell us more about the endangered species the Houston Zoo is actively working to save is Tarah Cornelius, Director of Animal Care at the Houston Zoo. Tarah, welcome to Hello Houston. It's nice to see you.
Thank you very much.
So tell us what, I know that you have had several endangered species over the years. What's going on there now?
So two of the species that we're heavily involved with, and we work with partner zoos and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife partner zoos here in Texas, are the Houston toad, which is not actually found in Houston, but it is a small, brown, very charismatic little toad that we've been working with for quite a few years now. And as a matter of fact, a lot of the work that zoos have done with repopulating the wild with these toads has really helped them bounce back with their numbers. And actually, we're hearing more males call in the wild than we have in a very, very, very long time. So that's really exciting and encouraging. We have a team that takes care of animal care staff that is dedicated to take care of Houston toads. That is their full-time job, is they take care of Houston toads and make sure that we have a good breeding population. And then we get to take them back out into the wild, and we actually release egg strands mainly. And last year alone, we released just the Houston Zoo, 1.8 million, over 1.8 million egg strands back into the wild. So they will develop into little tadpoles and then tiny little toads and help repopulate
So what?
a lot
so
of the
what,
historic areas.
I mean, nobody hunts toads. So what happens to the toads? Are they getting eaten by big animals?
Sure, there's predation, but a lot of it is habitat loss. There's wildfires that affect them, and they're completely dependent for their development on water. So clean water is one of the most essential things for amphibians to survive and to develop into adults to be able to reproduce again.
I mean, first of all, I think it's great that you're on talking about this, because I think too many people think of zoos as just a place that exhibit animals,
Yes.
and they don't see all the conservation work and why it's important we have this out there. But to go even just for this toad, for example, the Houston toad, is that what about to the understanding that there is a balance in nature, in the ecosystem, and if the toad is gone now, reintroducing it, how might that upset the balance that's currently out there?
So the nice thing with the Houston toad is it just kind of lives concurrently aside with like Gulf Coast toads, which look very similar, though there are two very different species. And so the population just has declined a lot. And so we, as zoo-based conservation organizations, said we don't want this species to go extinct. It's the Houston toad after all.
Absolutely.
So, as the Houston Zoo, we want to make sure that this really cool animal still survives. And so
in general, though, beyond just the toad, just the whole conservation concept of balancing out what happens.
Yeah, and I think that varies species to species, environment to environment. So, a lot of people are like, let's just let these animals back out into the wild. Well, unfortunately, there's not a lot of wild left for them. So that's when you can start running into some human-animal conflict, which is a real thing that happens around the world. And so one of the things we do is partner with different organizations in different places around the world. So one of the things we do is work with a partner to help protect lions. And one of the things they will do is if they know lions are coming to an area where there's people, they call and alert the people and say, hey, there's going to be lions in your area. And so then that lets them know they need to do
the music tells us
to help protect their livestock, just so there's not that conflict. Because
music tells us we're out of time. Where can people learn more about the work you're doing?
HoustonZoo.org, or come visit us at the zoo.
Thank you.
Tarah Cornelius is the Director of Animal Care at the Houston Zoo. Tarah, thanks for joining us. Coming up on Hello Houston, we invite you, our community, to share your thoughts on the city's budget and deficit crisis. Share your comments with us by calling or texting 713-440-8870. And we'll discuss how to prevent injuries this summer with Dr. Phillip, Bucky, Ribbeck, a sports medicine physician at Texas Children's Hospital. Stay with us for this second hour of Hello Houston.
Stay tuned. There's more Hello Houston on the way with Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley. For the latest in local news, subscribe to the Hello Houston daily newsletter at HoustonPublicMedia.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by the guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media. This is News 88.7.
You're listening to your NPR station. This is KUHF Houston News 88.7, a service of the University of Houston.
Just ahead on this hour of Hello Houston, we continue diving into today's top stories, including Governor Abbott having until June 22nd to decide the fate of 2 cannabis-related bills. I'm Frank Billingsley.
And I'm Celeste Diaz-Sherman. Also, we've discussed the city budget with elected officials. Now we want to hear from you, our community. What are your thoughts on the city budget and deficit crisis? We'll also talk with Alice Liu, a co-director of West Street Recovery, and Kourtney Revels, a member of the Northeast Action Collective, to share their thoughts.
And I'm Ernie Manous. In our Ask the Doctor segment, Dr. Phillip Bucky Ribbeck, a sports medicine physician at Texas Children's Hospital, will join us to talk about preventing summer injuries and more.
You can share your thoughts and questions by giving us a call or sending us a text at 713-440-8870. Or you can email us at talk@hellohouston.org.
Hello Houston is made possible in part by founding sponsors John Bradshaw and Kathy Sanders, and by gifts from listeners like you.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. The National Weather Service says it's hiring more than 100 employees to stabilize operations at its field offices. NPR's Greg Allen reports they were forced to scale back after the Trump administration cut nearly 600 positions.
A National Weather Service spokesperson says the new hires will fill positions at field offices where there's, quote, the greatest operational need. Following job cuts ordered by the Trump administration, some of the service's more than 100 field offices were no longer staffed around the clock. Some have also cut back on weather balloon launches, critical in gathering data needed for local and national forecasts. Following severe tornado outbreaks and with the beginning of hurricane season, the Trump administration granted the Weather Service an exemption to a government-wide hiring freeze. The agency says it will soon begin advertising for the mission-critical field positions. Greg Allen, NPR News, Miami.
The Democratic mayor of Newark is suing the acting U.S. attorney for New Jersey and a Homeland Security official. NPR's Ryan Lucas reports the lawsuit stems from his arrest outside of an immigration detention facility last month.
Newark Mayor Ras Baraka filed his lawsuit against acting U.S. Attorney for New Jersey, Alina Habba, and a Homeland Security investigations official named Ricky Patel. Baraka accuses them both of false arrest and malicious prosecution. He also accuses Habba, who was Trump's personal attorney, of defamation. Federal authorities arrested Baraka outside the Delaney Hall Immigration Detention Facility near Newark last month. Federal prosecutors charged him with misdemeanor trespass, but later dropped the charge. A judge admonished prosecutors over the case and questioned what he called the mayor's quote-unquote hasty arrest. Now, in his lawsuit, Baraka is seeking compensatory and punitive damages, but does not specify an amount. Ryan Lucas, NPR News, Washington.
Ukraine says it's detonated underwater explosives targeting a key road and rail bridge that connects the occupied peninsula of Crimea to Russia. NPR's Joanna Kakissis reports the bridge is used by Russia's military as a key logistics route.
After Russia illegally annexed Crimea in 2014, Russian President Vladimir Putin pushed to build the 12-mile-long bridge, which opened in 2018. Ukraine's security service confirmed it had planned Tuesday's attacks and claimed the blast severely damaged the bridge's base. It also posted video footage showing a blast in the sea and a photo of damage to the bridge. Russia says the bridge was temporarily closed to traffic. This is the second covert attack on Russia's infrastructure in the last 3 days. On Sunday, Ukraine struck Russia's strategic bomber fleet using drones smuggled deep into the Russian heartland. Joanna Kakissis, NPR News, Kyiv.
On Wall Street, the Dow was up 194 points. This is NPR.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Gabrielle Dawkins. Houston City Council will take up Mayor John Whitmire's $7 billion proposed budget on Wednesday, and they'll also hear a financial report from Comptroller Chris Hollins. Hollins released a list of concerns about the budget last week, including the $107 million gap between revenue and spending, which Whitmire describes as no deficit.
I've read in the press that, this budget doesn't have a deficit in it, when in fact it has a budget deficit of over $100 million. And that's in an optimistic scenario. It could get much worse than that if you look at some of the other realities.
The two are likely to clash on Wednesday. A spokesperson for Whitmire says the mayor's office expects Hollins to certify the budget. The Texas legislative session is at an end, and State Senator Molly Cook says there are some issues that still need to be addressed. News 88.7's Tom Perumian reports.
Cook's comments on Hello Houston ranged from not enough being done for Texans to too much rhetoric in bills.
We would love to see things like Medicaid expansion that could have the largest portion of that kind of cost to be borne by the federal government. We see a massive, massive investment in things like prisons and Operation Lone Star, while the Department of State Health Services and DFPS that care for our foster children do not see as much of an investment.
Cook took issue with a number of bills, including language that, if passed, were not reviewable by the judiciary, which she sees as a way to try and legislate around needed checks and balances in government. I'm Tom Perumian, News 88.7.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott is in Houston today to sign a bail reform package. The bill would restrict who is eligible for cashless bonds and allow the state to appeal bail decisions. Abbott is also expected to approve a Senate joint resolution today for a constitutional amendment that would allow bail to be denied for certain crimes. Whether that's implemented or not will be decided by voters in November. It's 87 degrees. I'm Gabrielle Dawkins, News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive Insurance, where drivers can compare direct rates using Progressive's rate comparison tool. Customers can see options and rates side by side. More at progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE.
From Houston Public Media and News 88.7, it's Hello Houston, an open forum on today's biggest stories affecting Houston and beyond. Call now, 713-440-8870, or let us know your thoughts on today's topics by emailing us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now here's your host for Hello Houston, Ernie Manous, Celestia Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
Hello. Back again with you for the next hour of Hello Houston. Remember, our entire show is cataloged. You can find us on YouTube even after the fact. You can go back and watch the show, or we have a podcast. We don't talk about that often enough. The full show is available as a podcast, but also the commuter cut. So on your way home, if you've missed the show, it's a 40-minute cut-down version of the full show and should get you home in your commute, because the average commute time in this area is
40 minutes.
There, we've thought it all out for you. Remember, go to YouTube, look for Houston Public Media's channel, and there you will find us.
We should probably do a story on why it's 40 minutes. That's a long commute. 40 minutes?
But I live...
We don't have trains. We're talking about automobiles, right?
But I live right on the other side of downtown, and the station is on the opposite side of downtown. So I just have to go around downtown, and it can take me driving home 20 minutes. It shouldn't, but it does.
I know. That's my point.
Yeah. So 40 minutes doesn't sound long at all.
I mean, even our 6-lane freeways aren't enough.
I remember someone running for mayor, I won't say who, and his answer was to turn I-10 into a, what did he say, 24-lane highway, and that would end our congestion?
Well, it just about is.
Oh, my Lord.
It's about 16 now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's crazy.
I know.
Anyway, anything on the weather you want to share with us?
Well, I was looking at our model cane, which I think is still pretty extreme. which is this crazy idea that we might see some kind of a storm in the Gulf of Mexico in the next 2 weeks. But it's way out there. This happens every time the summer season starts. We have a little spin up in the Caribbean that wants to come this way, but that spin up never actually materializes.
Yeah.
So anyone looking at these long-term models, don't panic about it, because I don't think it's going to happen.
And the other thing,
Oh, sorry.
the other thing I was going to say is that you were explaining to me, Frank, how the meteorologic calendar starts June 1st, but then the solstice for summer starts the 21st.
Yeah, that has to do with the sun being over the equator and coming back into the Tropic of Cancer. But for record keeping and climatological purposes, it's just a lot easier for summer to be June, July, August, and then September, October, November. And so that's why we do it the way we do it.
Well, I'm sure we'll hear a lot about hurricanes over the next season because we have Frank right here with us. But today we want to jump right into our first headline of this segment. Celeste, take it away.
Coming out of Austin, Governor Greg Abbott has until June 22nd to decide the fate of two cannabis-related bills as the 89th Texas legislature concluded its regular session at the state capitol. House Bill 46, which would expand the state's medical marijuana program, and Senate Bill 3, which would ban the sale of THC products in Texas. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick has championed the THC ban, positioning the issue as a public health concern. Yesterday, a coalition of groups opposing Senate Bill 3 delivered boxes containing thousands of letters to Governor Greg Abbott's office, urging him to veto the legislation. The opposition argues the bill would eliminate access to THC products for people experiencing trauma or chronic pain, including veterans. Do you feel the governor should use this veto power for these two bills? Give us a call, 713-440-8870.
Yeah, when I look at House Bill 46, I want to know what they mean by expand the state's medical marijuana program. And by expanding it, does that mean it's easier to get a prescription from your doctor? Most doctors I know that if you request something that seems legit, they will give it to you. I'm wondering if that is going to balance out the ban on the THC bill.
Mm-hmm. Well, it might, but one's medical and the other, the THC bill is about
recreational.
I don't know if it's recreational. We've talked about it. Those kind of products helped my mother with her dementia.
Right, but then couldn't your mother have talked, or a family member talked to your mother's doctor and then gotten a prescription for it? That's what I'm saying about, would it balance some of it out?
Well, I don't know that. Well, a medical marijuana program, does that just give you marijuana, or does that give you products that have marijuana in
your mom's
them?
lighting up a joint in the back.
I know, right? So what I'm talking about is these THC products that are like,
right.
But there's like chocolate that has some THC in it that can have a calming effect. And I think that's what the veterans are talking about, that people who experience trauma, sometimes chronic pain, can find help in these THC products, which are, generally speaking, a lot cheaper, especially if these medical marijuana products aren't covered by your insurance program.
Right.
What I find interesting is when we look at House Bill 46, and we're looking at expanding the state's medical marijuana program. I believe almost every state, now don't quote me on that, but the majority of states in the United States have some form of medical marijuana use that you can go through a pharmacy. It is essentially regulated, right? What I find most interesting, though, about Senate Bill 3 is it would ban the sale of THC products in general. And that approach, it's an interesting approach in that when we look at the boundary of marijuana and medical marijuana and just the use of marijuana in general, what Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick has said is it's a absolutely no. If you start allowing little parts of it or in chocolate or, under the guise of medical, then it will become a problem. And so is that approach the smartest approach when we look at the economic impacts that this can have for people, when we look at the health impacts that it could have for veterans, mental health, for cancer patients? I'm not sure SB 3 is, I go back and forth because I understand Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick's thought process behind it. We're just going to ban it completely. We don't want it. I'm not sure that is the best approach, though.
And my bigger concern here is that we hear conflicting information about the health dangers of THC or marijuana when compared to like alcohol. But the studies, the things that I have seen, almost always points to alcohol being more damaging to what it does to your system, to the way you behave when on it, can lead to more problems. So does it make sense in a culture in which we see alcohol as just a part of daily life for so many people? The whole thing, the women drinking their wine at 5 o'clock, it's wine time, all of that. A culture that embraces alcohol would, on the other hand, be so opposed to the marijuana if, in fact, health-wise, marijuana doesn't seem, from reports I've seen, to be as damaging. But when you hear them talk on the floor of the State House, they're talking about how dangerous it is and how horrible it is for people.
And for a very long time, it was called the gateway drug. And
then there's that whole argument.
So, what we need to do is get a doctor on here to talk to us about the differences, and maybe even a law enforcement officer to talk to us about when they pull over somebody who's been drinking, what that looks like versus when they're pulling over somebody, if it is a danger, when they have when
they're
high.
stoned.
Well, if you're going to want to go down that road, no pun intended, you look at the statistics for texting and driving versus alcohol and driving. And they're very similar as far as accidents that are occurring when people are texting and driving.
The fact that texting and driving is not illegal in
Well,
the
I
state
think
of
a lot
Texas is
how do you enforce
crazy
it?
to me.
How do you enforce
Well, in
it?
the state of California, they enforce it. I mean, it's the same thing with seatbelts. How do you enforce it? You just say
You should
you're
not
going to
drive
get
when
fined.
impaired or lack of attention.
I don't know if it's still on the books, but Galveston, it was illegal in Galveston. And I think over a 2-year period, they didn't have a single ticket written for it.
If you have a
We wanna
thought,
hear.
a
Yep.
feeling about these two bills we're talking about, either expanding the state's medical marijuana program or the ban of the THC products in Texas, give us a call. We would love to know what you think. It's 713-440-8870. We have Shar on the line from Cyprus right now. Shar, what are you thinking?
Well, I know my mom was on medical marijuana, and medical marijuana is generally not smokable. They don't want to perpetuate lung cancer in cancer patients.
So
Tablets,
that's why it's in
sprays.
chocolate?
Hold on a second.
Yeah.
Shar, for 1 second you had dropped out. Restate what you just said?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Medical marijuana generally isn't smokable because they don't want to perpetuate lung cancers. However, it's usually oils, tinctures, tablets, sprays, and edibles.
Yeah. What do you
And they're usually done by low dose, like 2 milligrams, 4 milligrams. My mom had cancer and had medical marijuana in Minnesota, and that's what it is. And it's a different pharmacy than the THC places that you see around town.
Did you see benefits from her using it?
She did not. I think hers was started a little too late. But I do know other people who have used it, and it increases their appetite because cancer starves you. But there are a lot of people with ailments, especially veterans, people that find a lot of benefits from the ones for sleep, the ones for, pains. So, I mean, I think medical marijuana is a whole different game than recreational.
Hey, Shar, did Medicare or your mom's insurance cover that medical marijuana?
Yes.
Yeah. So,
Yes, for the most part.
So it is prescribed. I wonder if there would end up being an underground medical marijuana.
Of course, there's an underground everything. Shar, thank you very much. I'm sorry about what your mother had to go through. I'm sorry what you as a family had to go through, but thank you for sharing your story with us.
Think about it this way, though. People will find a way to get it if you don't make it legal.
Yep.
So it's better to tax it and have at least get some benefits to the state.
Yep. Thank you about
that's a
that,
good
Shar.
point, yeah.
Let's go over to another call at 713-440-8870. It is Anthony from the North Side. Anthony, what are you thinking?
Man, I'm thinking that everybody out there is going to these stores, and a lot of these now I'm buying. No, you're not buying marijuana. You're not even buying nothing close to marijuana. And what they're doing is they're taking that and selling it on the street as marijuana. When there's all these people, I know a bunch of people, and they all thinking that they're legally getting marijuana. No, they're not. They're buying CBD and Delta 8. The only thing is I support the CBD and Delta 8 for the sick people. But what about all these thugs and people all over the world? My neighbor's son just got killed because they shot him and robbed him because he had it on the internet that he was selling marijuana. Yeah, he was selling CBD and Delta 8. It's not real. It's not real marijuana that people are fighting for. It's greed.
Yeah.
You know, I support everything. I support marijuana when it's real marijuana. You know, but I'm not going to sit there and go buy something. I could go buy a pound right now of that stuff on the streets that they're selling in the stores for $300 a pound, and go sell each ounce for $100 because it's the black market thing. And then if people don't care about what it is, they just care about making the money.
So then I guess I'd take from this that you're in favor of regulating it so we know what it is and how much it's being sold for, and that there's tax base to it, that it takes it off the street theoretically and would bring it into control.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly, man, because if you put it, if it says 3%, if it's in the stores, it's not real. I mean, so don't people stop getting excited because you think you're smoking legal marijuana. Wait till the government comes up, and then we could grow it, and then we could do it.
Anthony, thank you very much for your thoughts. We have another call at 713-440-8870. It is Alan. Hello.
Yes, I would like to comment historically that it was almost 90-some years ago that they made this invented word marijuana illegal, but the motivation may have been the timber industry and the oil companies and so forth. Henry Ford was planning to use the plastics from hemp to make panels for the cars, and was frustrated that they passed that law. But we could be using this as a modern crop, hemp, to make plastics and paper and things like that, because you can grow many crops per year as opposed to growing pine trees to make paper. So we need to discuss hemp as part of the overall prospect of this, not just the medical marijuana concept of cannabis.
Alan, thank you very much for that comment. He called us at 713-440-8870. I can't read this next test because I feel like I'd be stealing your friend from you, Celeste.
Oh, my British computer guy. I believe it's already been shown that drunk drivers are more dangerous than high drivers. High drivers are more cautious, while drunk drivers are more reckless. Not that you would know, right, my British computer guy?
Yeah, we don't know. And also there was another one that follows right on that same tag.
DC says, when I'm too high to drive, I am far more inclined to post up somewhere safe and wait it out.
And I think that's probably
smart.
Pretty true.
Why do you guys have me reading these? Huh?
You can text us or call us at the same number, 713-440-8870. Kirby's on the line from Galveston.
Yay, Galveston. Hi, Kirby.
Hi, how's it going? I keep hearing y'all talk about cannabis regulation and deregulation and Governor Abbott, but, I want to talk about Dan Patrick and how last year he took $325,000 from lobbyists from brewery associations, distilleries here in Texas, and now he wants to act like he's on a moral high ground, like he cares about Texas kids and he cares about our health. He doesn't. He cares about making money, and I'm not hearing that enough, and I'll let y'all run with it.
Well, he gave us something to run with. Kirby, thank you for calling us. What are your thoughts out there as you listen and hear comments from Kirby or from our other callers? Give us a call or text us at 713-440-8870.
Kirby brings up an excellent point in that, we see what these politicians are putting forth and working through policy. But yet we don't know when we should, looking at who are their investors, who's backing them, and where's their agenda coming from.
Right. And they make $7,000 being in the Senate or the House. They make nothing. It's almost just a hobby. So what do they do on their off time? And what industry are they involved in? And who are their friends? And there's, you're right. There's always something else under the light.
Under the light, yep.
We have one more call on the line at 713-440-8870. That's 8870. It's Bob. Bob, what's on your mind from Spring Branch?
Well, I just tuned in. This point may have already been made, but it's like Freakonomics. By them banning this stuff in Texas or making it illegal to sell, it's just going to increase the sales of regular marijuana that the cartels import. So basically, we're just going to make the cartels richer with the Texas dollars.
Yep.
And people are going to it's going to actually increase crime because people are going to turn to regular marijuana. It's like Freakonomics. It's going to have the opposite effect of whatever they're trying to do. It's just weird.
Yeah. Where do these gangs make their money that we're all afraid of? We want to get rid of all these gangs, but primarily they are importers of drugs.
Bob, thank you for that. And it's a point that keeps coming up. I think that those that are in favor of these banning bills will go back to the health of it and feeling as though the marijuana is so dangerous to individuals that we need to get the dangerous drug off the street, as opposed to saying it's a dangerous drug, we'll regulate it, but it's still a dangerous drug. I think it goes down to if you believe or if the science supports the fact how dangerous marijuana is or not. We're interested in your thoughts on this, 713-440-8870. Okay, before we wrap out of time, I've got to read this story. It's been floating on my script for a while today, and I have to do it because I want Celeste's reaction to this. Stephanie Case went viral after sitting down 3 times during a 100-kilometer race in Wales to breastfeed her 6-month-old daughter.
Wow.
That's not the part that gets me all excited. It's the next part of this. The new mom not only finished the race, but also placed first among the women.
Yeah.
Wow. Go her.
She took her breaks to breastfeed and still beat the other runner.
Who carried the kid behind her?
Probably the hubby. Probably
think
the
about
hubby.
that.
You know, that is the power of the female body right there. I mean, it is absolutely, women are, we're strong. What can we say? And this is, I don't know if I can say it, but she is an absolute in my book. Yeah. And I
think if they remount Wonder Woman, Stephanie Case should play Wonder Woman in the film.
Absolutely. Go Stephanie Case. Coming up on Hello Houston, we'll get your thoughts on the city's budget. Plus, we'll talk to some community leaders to get their thoughts. You're listening to Hello Houston on News 88.7.
Hi, I'm Craig Cohen, the host of Houston Matters. Join me weekday mornings at 9 or at your leisure on your podcast feed for your daily guide to the people, places, issues, and ideas that define Greater Houston. From politics to the economy, energy to the environment, healthcare to education to transportation and beyond. If it matters to Houston, it matters to us. Check us out wherever you get your podcasts or live on the air weekdays at 9 a.m. right here on News 88.7.
Houston Public Media is rooted in our community. We show up at school board meetings, city council votes, and neighborhood events.
That's how you stay informed about what's happening around you through deep local reporting that brings clarity and insight.
Your support powers this public service, so Greater Houston stays informed, connected, and safe.
Support local journalism right now at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 888-909-0887.
Houston Public Media brings to you PBS World. Experience the personal connection behind the headlines with programming devoted to telling stories that humanize complex issues. PBS World on TV 8.6 and online at houstonpublicmedia.org.
Support comes from Downtown Houston Plus, with new businesses like Tenfold Coffee Company, Meow Wolf, Barbacana, Punchline Comedy Club, and Bubble Boba. Details at downtownhouston.org.
Support comes from the Eternal Gandhi Museum Houston, highlighting the power of nonviolent conflict resolution through examples of peace leaders worldwide. Now open. Field trips and group visits available. More at egmh.org.
Support comes from Stewart PC, a Houston law firm assisting executives and employers with executive employment agreements, litigating executive compensation and non-compete agreements, and management training. More at attorneysforexecutives.com.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on any of today's topics, call 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now back to Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
We've talked about the city budget and deficit crisis with several elected officials on Hello Houston, including Mayor John Whitmire and Controller Chris Hollins. Today, we want to hear from you, the community, about your thoughts on how the city leaders are handling the budget. You can call us at 713-440-8870 or even text us or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Today, though, community-based voices leading our discussion will be Alice Liu, co-director of West Street Recovery. Welcome to the program. And Kourtney Revels, who is a member of the Northeast Action Collective. Alice, Kourtney, thanks to both of you for being here. Again, we want to hear from all of you out there. Give us a call, 713-440-8870. Alice, start me off with, what do you feel we're missing in these discussions we're having about the budget out there in the common square?
Yeah, absolutely. What this Houston Says No to Whitmire's budget movement is trying to bring into the public light is that a lot of what's been repeated by Whitmire, by department heads, and repeated in the media is, at the end of the day, just a total lie. It's impossible to cut $290 million from departments that are already strained, already understaffed, already under-resourced, and claim that that's not going to lead to a reduction in services. And this is common sense, but it's also a reality that we've heard repeated by city workers and by residents who are at the other end of not receiving the services that they need in this budget.
Kourtney, let me give you a chance to also answer the same question before we dig in.
I think she pretty much covered it.
Okay. I just want to make sure I didn't leave one of you out when we set up the conversation. I guess the overlying question then for me, and then I'll open it up and we'll go at it on it, but it's, what would you do, though, if you were facing this deficit and have to put together a city budget? How do you make it balance out? Or, as I've said many times on the show, have we just gotten too big that there's no way to balance a city budget?
It's a great question, and I'll just start by saying it is an undeniable fact that Houston does have a revenue problem. We are not getting enough revenue for the size of city that we are. We have a growing population, and there's restrictions at the state level, at the city level, that are preventing us from getting enough money coming in. But what's really important is that what Whitmire has been saying about the decisions that he's made with the city budget, at the end of the day, we have to call him out that these are not decisions that actually reflect fiscal responsibility. And the biggest proof of that is what he's just done with giving police an $832 million raise after saying for months and months that the city is broke, that the city doesn't have enough money, right? So we see that this decision to fund police at the cost of almost every other department, including health, including neighborhoods, arts, libraries, parks, we see that that is not a decision that comes from fiscal responsibility, but it's a political choice that he's making.
Let me ask you this. Would you be in favor of raising the local sales tax? As long as I've been in Houston, I've been here since 1989. It seems like it's been 8.25%. As far back as I can remember, we've just never raised it. But that's a fair tax. Everybody who buys something pays it, in that sense. But it's not something that I hear talked about. Either one of you?
It's inevitable. We'll have to do something to generate more income, right? We'll have to increase taxes in some kind of way. But what's really important to us is that with the money that we have, we're responsible and we're equitable and we're spending it fairly and in the place that Houstonians have asked it to be allocated, which is right now what we're talking about is flood infrastructure.
Well, I think we all agree that the fire department certainly deserved what they got, because that had been kicked down the road by Sylvester Turner for 6 years, and I think Whitmire did the right thing with the fire department, and I can't raise a lot of objection to giving police raises, and we've seen it just now happening in the county because the deputies there were like, wait a minute, we're at $55,000 and you just raised them to $81,000 or $2,000, and so they took them to $75,000. So this isn't, I don't know how you get around it.
Yeah, I think and I'm sure a lot of Houstonians do agree with that, but I think at the end of the day, what Whitmire's presenting us with is a false solution and a false set of choices to choose from, right? All of the same reasons why we might want police to be paid fairly. Whitmire's turning around and using coercive measures to deny other city staff of retirement pay, of benefits that they deserve and that they've accumulated. He has forced people to accept retirement deals that has led to over 1,000 Houstonians retiring early. So what we're saying is that can we apply these same principles of fairness to everyone who works for the city of Houston? And at the end of the day, Whitmire has put every other city employee on the chopping block to protect these departments that he clearly favors over everything else.
So you're saying that Whitmire is favoring police by giving them what most research is backing, a increase in pay, which they have not gotten in many years, and you are also wanting them to be fiscally responsible, but yet also help every other department. So you're basically saying there should be no priority on any of these departments. Everybody across the board should be getting raises. That seems a little not fiscally responsible.
I think what it comes back to, and Kourtney can speak more on this, is democracy, right? At the end of the day, the billions of dollars that are at stake in this budget, they belong to the people. They don't belong to Whitmire. Whitmire has been elected to benefit the people who actually live in the city of Houston. And we've seen on a number of measures that Whitmire has directly defied the democratic will of voters. This is, Kourtney said that we're here to talk about drainage infrastructure specifically. So what we've seen is that Whitmire has spent months, if not years, actually going against increasing funding to drainage that Houstonians have voted in favor of twice. And what this has led to is hundreds of millions of dollars less that are going to repairing our streets, making sure homes don't flood. We're entering hurricane season incredibly unprepared, and this is a budget that not only doesn't address these long-standing infrastructure problems, but it worsens them.
Let me jump in and ask Kourtney. If you got to sit down with the mayor earlier in this process and you're looking at the city budget and the deficit and what funds we expect to come in, how would you calculate a city budget that's balanced, fair, and equitable?
So one of the things we need to do is we do need to be seeking more funds. We should be reaching out to state and federal level for more funding. That's another source of revenue. We've talked about it. And also, I mean, unfortunately, sometimes you have to make tough decisions, and this isn't a tough decision. This is a thing where the people have voted for something, and we have used our democratic power to vote for this money to go into flood infrastructure, and that saves our homes. So for me, it's not a hard decision to make a historic call to put this amount of money into flood infrastructure. It's due time.
And I agree that people have voted that in, and that money should be allocated to that. But then comes the conflict, the problem of now with the money you have left and the city government that has to be supported with it, how would you find equitable ways to apply that money? Either of you, yeah.
I think the problem here is that hasn't happened, right? So you're taking that as a granted that drainage is being funded adequately.
No, I'm not taking it as a granted. I'm saying if you took that money and did apply it like it has been asked to be applied, now with what you would have had left, how would you have then found an equitable way to run the city? I do not agree with the fact that you ignore what the people voted in. I'm with you on this, and I know there's been the court case, and now as I understand, they're trying to resolve this part of the problem. But how else can you balance this budget?
I think that I really want to try, if it's okay, I really want to try to have the conversation on our terms. So we are not accountants, we're not financial experts, and I think the way that Whitmire has made this conversation about the budget into something that's about balancing the books, that's about fiscal responsibility, I think that's a very important narrative, and I think when you have Comptroller Hollins back, he can do a much better job at speaking on that. But for us, a budget is a document that should reflect the democratic will of the people. It's a moral document, and at the end of the day, it's the budget is not just numbers on a piece of paper. The budget is actualized in our daily lives with being able to drive on functional streets, being able to take our kids to the park, being able to go to a library that isn't falling apart, that actually has the books we need to learn and educate ourselves, being able to fund the artists, the cultural workers who make Houston what it is. So for us, this is what Houston Says No is about. We're standing up and we're saying no to Whitmire's budget, and we're trying to reframe the conversation in our terms because this is our city. This is our money at the end of the day.
So you mentioned Comptroller Hollins. On Friday, he did release a statement specifically talking about the drainage settlement. He did say the court's approval of the drainage settlement removes a major obstacle to adopting a responsible budget. It's a step forward. Sorry, something just popped up. But Houston still faces serious financial challenges. So would you agree that perhaps we're not exactly where we need to be, but we are moving in the right direction when it comes to drainage and what y'all are saying? Because Controller Hollins is.
I'll let Kourtney answer this question, but on the legal case, all I'll say is that there are still legal options on the table. Mm-hmm. This is basically a lower court has agreed with the city, and that goes directly against what the Supreme Court of Texas has said in the past, which does not agree with the city's deal that Whitmire has proposed. So there are still legal options on the table, and for us, the legal situation is not final.
Where is City Council falling on all of this?
Before that, I'm sorry. It's like a tale of two cities. I live in an area that floods. Like this recent amount of rainfall that might be regular to some flooded us in our communities, flooded our streets, made them impassable. The police cars that are being bought they're not boats. They wouldn't have been able to get to my community. So it's fair to say that, police might need raises, but not at the extent of flood infrastructure and flood justice. The settlement that we paid for this agreement that we're paying to the police is way more than we were asking for in this settlement, or that was due to Houstonians in this settlement for flood infrastructure. So the better conversation would have come after we settled up with the people. We wouldn't be having this in as big of a deficit either if we settled up with Houstonians first. And I can't really speak for where City Council may fall. Everybody, I can't speak for them.
But have you taken your concerns to them?
Absolutely. We've taken our concerns to them. They agree that we need this type of flood infrastructure and this flood investment, but we're being pitted against two necessities, so to speak, for our city.
You're listening to Hello Houston. We're speaking with Alice Liu, co-director of West Street Recovery, and Kourtney Revels, a member of the Northeast Action Collective. You can join the conversation at 713-440-8870. We do have some calls on the line. Jack from Montrose has Jack, welcome to Hello Houston. What is your comment or question?
Well, I'm super neighborhood president for Neartown Montrose. I've been down to many of those committee meeting things. So here's the problem. We don't have enough revenue. One of the things we can do, we could put on the ballot that we would like to exempt police and fire from the budget cap. That would help out somewhat. The last mayor should have tackled this. The other thing is we could start paying at least a small garbage fee, because almost every other city does it. On a sales tax is very regressive. It affects poor people a lot more than rich people. But every year at the budget session, they talk about we need to have more revenue, but nobody does anything. And pretty much the council members will approve this budget because they don't have any power in the city compared to the mayor.
Thank you, Jack from Montrose. We also have a call from Sam from Sugar Land. Welcome to Hello Houston. What is your comment or question, Sam?
Yeah, hello, madam. As a responsible person in my house, I always balance my budget. If I have a bad year, I have to tighten my belts and spend less and take sacrifices and do what is essential. So, and the same goes for the mayor and same goes for the president. If they have to balance the budget, there's no two ways about it. You have to spend less than what your revenues are coming in, and you must save for the rainy day. There's no two ways about it. They have to cut whatever needs to be cut to. Whatever can be cut, people have to sacrifice. There's no two ways.
Sam, thank you for your call. We're interested in what you all think. Give us a call, 713-440-8870. Alice, I saw you jot something down when he was talking, so I think you probably have a reaction.
Yeah, I just wanted to answer your question earlier about how City Council has responded. Mm-hmm. We are seeing the tide turn slowly but surely at City Council. And this is not to sound overly optimistic, but we've seen council members such as Pollard, such as Tiffany Thomas, issue very strong statements on social media that what Whitmire has been saying about the budget is what's happening with the budget is not all that meets the eye, that the reality is that it will lead to a reduction in services and that it is undemocratic. I also wanted to give Kourtney a chance to speak on what we've been doing, not just this season, but over the past 3 years to bring these concerns to City Council.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, over the last 3 years, we've really been we've been taking a lot of folks out to not just bring them to city council, but educating folks on what's actually happening. I'm sorry, these headphones on. So we've taken over 100 folks from the Northeast Houston area, 5th Ward, East Houston, Settegast, all these different communities to testify. We've been talking about this ad valorem tax diversion for years now. It's not something that we've just brought up. So that's why it's so important to us. You know, because we've been paying attention. We've gotten other people paying attention. Obviously, the mayor knows about it. So it's as big a deal as these other settlements. You know, it's time to settle up with constituents, because if we're talking about increased revenue, how can we trust these elected officials to do what they're going to say they're supposed to do with this money when they haven't done it time and time again? Not one mayor, not two mayors, you know? So it's starting to look like poor culture. And who's going to change that?
If folks want to learn about the work you're each doing or more into the community and how to get involved, where can they go?
So we do have a fresh website, HoustonSaysNo.com, that really lays out in more detail a lot of what we're saying with the budget and underfunding key departments. And you can also go to weststreetrecovery.org to learn more about West Street Recovery and the Northeast Action Collective.
Alice Liu is the co-director and West Street Recovery, and Kourtney Revels is a member of the Northeast Action Collective. Thank you both for joining us today on Hello Houston.
Thank you so much. And you can also come to City Hall tomorrow. We will have a rally at 8:15.
And 1 p.m.
And 1 p.m. Right. Just come all day.
Yeah.
After the break, how you can help your kids from getting injured this summer. We'll hear from Dr. Phillip Bucky Ribbeck, sports medicine physician within Texas Children's Hospital Orthopedics and Sports Medicine Department, as Hello Houston continues.
Did you know 80% of our funding comes from listeners like you, right here in Houston? That's why your support is so important. When you give to Houston Public Media, you're investing in trusted news and educational programming that millions depend on daily. Every dollar you give makes a difference, ensuring this public service stays strong for everyone in our community. Help us support this mission. Give today at HoustonPublicMedia.org or call 888-909-0887.
I want to make a movie about this.
The Arts Hour brings you film.
The themes in it are so far ahead of their time.
Books.
The detail is amazing.
Art.
There's all the personal stuff.
Theatre.
Lots of singing and dancing and colours.
Music.
The dance floor is made for dancing.
And everything in between.
I want it to be exciting.
That's the Arts Hour with me, Nikki Beatty.
I really identified with it.
From the BBC.
The Arts Hour, Friday nights at 9 on News 88.7.
Support comes from GiveMeTheVIN.com. Purchasing vehicles in minutes with the VIN or license plate, or by bringing the vehicle to Houston area offices. Details at GiveMeTheVIN.com.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Central Market, celebrating Texas farmers and makers with Texas-grown peaches, locally roasted coffee, and Black Angus beef from Chalk Mountain. Now through June 17th. More at centralmarket.com.
Support comes from Rice University's Baker Institute, where you can hear world leaders from presidents to prime ministers right here in Houston, with access to conversations on issues affecting the world. More at bakerinstitute.org/membership.
Donations come in many forms: a monthly membership, a one-time gift, and that extra vehicle you no longer need. We take any kind of vehicle in any condition. Learn more at HoustonPublicMedia.org/cars. And thank you.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on any of today's topics, call 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now back to Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
The beginning of June means that summer break has or is about to begin for many Houston area children and families. While this means we can expect to see kids engaging in free play outside or playing various sports, many pediatric experts refer to this time of the year as injury season or trauma season due to the increase in injuries or accidents that tend to occur during these months. Joining us now to tell us more about how to prevent injuries and how to maybe recognize a serious injury this summer is Dr. Phillip Bucky Ribbeck, a sports medicine physician within Texas Children's Hospital Orthopedics and Sports Medicine Department. Dr. Ribbeck, welcome to Hello Houston.
Yeah, thanks for having me on today.
So we were just
Before
chatting
we even
a second
start,
ago.
if you have questions for Dr. Bucky, give us a call right now, 713-440-8870.
Okay. So we were just chatting a little second ago about what is the most common injury that you see as we get into the summer months. And what can you tell us about that?
Sure. I mean, I think in my sports medicine practice, what I see a lot of over the summer are some throwing injuries with the shoulder and the elbow. Baseball season, while it traditionally has been in that kind of spring season, right? Now it's becoming year-round, and we're seeing a lot more injuries over the summertime with travel ball and select teams really cranking up the dial. And then we also are seeing a lot of fractures, wrist fractures, kids falling, trying to catch themselves, falling off the scooter, that type of thing as well.
Do you really see it more now than just during the school year?
There are definitely seasonalities to different injury types. Like we were discussing earlier, when we think about concussions, we see those a lot more in football season, right? Yeah. Similar type of thing. With baseball, obviously, yes, it is more year-round at this point, but there are still higher areas of volume that they get during that spring season, and then, of course, over the summer when everybody has more free time.
When I saw this referred to as trauma season, my first thought was, is it because of lack of supervision? In school, they're watched all the time. They come home in the summer. There's a lot more going on. They're out and about. It's more dangerous. Or is that just wives' tale-ish?
No, I think there's some credence to that. When you are in school, there's a lot more structured play. There's a lot more structured time. And you don't have that free time that in the summer it hits, and then it can be a little chaotic at times, right? Yeah. And so when you are left to your own devices, obviously there's not as many guardrails as there would be in school, and then you certainly have higher risk for those types of injuries.
I live in a neighborhood where there are lots of kids, and they love to play in the front. And I think of when I'm getting home from work, I can picture these little boys throwing the football and running, and they jump and just fall on the ground. When should a parent? They are like puppies. They just want to wrestle and play, and it's summer, and so they have all day. They're tired by the end of the day. When should a parent say, okay, we're not at a baseball field, we're not at we're at home, so I don't have a coach saying you need to take him in or your daughter. Right. When should a parent assess something and say, oh my gosh, this is serious, we need to take them in?
Some of the biggest things to look out for are the timing of the complaints of pain, right? And so if they're a little sore after some activity, that's reasonable, right? But if they continue to over and over, they're saying, oh my gosh, like my knee is really killing me. I can't go on anymore. I can't play. I'm slowing down. Billy across the street is making fun of me because I'm hobbling around.
Billy.
Definitely.
I've heard of him.
Definitely those are times where you want to get checked out. And if you're looking for when do I take my kid to the emergency room, like what is that time where this is a little bit beyond what I'm comfortable with? You're looking for things like if they can't physically put weight on a limb, so if they can't walk at all, they're struggling to put any kind of weight on an ankle or a knee or a hip or something like that, definitely deserves really quick evaluation and making sure you get that checked soon.
I want to talk about a couple of things. Heat stress, because that can get away from a kid. They don't understand I need to drink a lot of water and I need to put on sunscreen and all that. How do we get that message across? And then Bill Spencer from Channel 2 used to always do these, he still does these stories about these kids that have unknown heart ailment and they get into football practice and suddenly have a heart attack.
Yes.
So can we talk about both of those?
Yeah, so I will say the second one with the heart issues, that's a huge discussion that's ongoing, and there's great ideas from both sides, and it's very complex discussion. But for the heat illness, we can talk about one of the things that I like to reference, which is a readily accessible resource, is the UIL heat stress protocols. And so UIL is our high school body for sports, right? And they oversee everything, and they make some recommendations. A lot of times it's seen as targeted towards football, but we can kind of extrapolate a lot of that stuff for even just our kids' free play in the summertime. And so basically it breaks down based on temperature, chunks of temperature, right? If you're 50 to 70 degrees, you have no restrictions from outdoor activity and things like that. If you're 70 to 85 degrees, maybe you have a little more restriction. You want to take a 3-minute, 4-minute break every so often, every hour, right? So that you're getting some reprieve from some of the temperature outside. You're able to hydrate, you're able to recover, and then keep playing. And so as that temperature climbs, you can just kind of follow, again, you can look at these sort of protocols that give you a general guidance and tailor that towards what your situation is. And so if you have a kid who's playing out in the street, it's 90 degrees outside, it's 80% humidity, that tells you right away that, okay, there's definitely a greater risk of heat stress just because of the atmosphere around you. Now, what do we do to combat that? Okay, we take more frequent breaks. So every 15 minutes, you can take a 4-minute break inside in the shade, drink some water, get back out, go play. And certainly if you set those standards and you say, okay, this is what I would like you to do when you go out and play, come back, get some drinks just for a couple minutes, and then go back out and play, you can still allow a little bit of leeway there, but at least you have a framework for trying to prevent that type of overheating.
And if you're thirsty, you're already behind the ball, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you got to drink before you're thirsty.
Yes.
Yeah.
What about the old adage, if you can step on it, it's not broken? I heard that my whole life. If you can walk, it's not
Or
broken.
can you move your face? I
Right,
tell my kids, can you move it?
Then
Can
it's
you
not
wiggle?
broken.
Can
I
you
think
wiggle?
we're wrong on our medical advice here.
I think it's a little reductive, right? Yeah. But to that point, there's a lot of what we see in kids where it's not the traditional type of fracture or broken bone that everybody is familiar with, where you see a giant crack going through the bone and something is bent and looks obviously wrong, right? Kids have these things called growth plates, and those growth plates are at the ends of your long bones traditionally, and also at sites where tendons are attaching and pulling on the bone. And they have this sort of line of cartilage that runs through that area of bone. And cartilage, just like the tip of your nose or your earlobe, is very soft and malleable, and it's not as strong or firm as those bones around it. So especially in kids, we can see somebody who may be feeling like they had, they twisted their ankle, and you think, okay, it's probably a sprain of the ankle, right? You take them in, you get some x-rays, and we see that growth plate on the side of the ankle has been widened, and that tells us that there's an injury or a fracture through that growth plate area. And so while something that may look like sort of a run-of-the-mill ankle sprain to the majority of people, we can see that as actually a fracture in a kid.
So I guess that takes me back to Celeste's earlier question. When do we know is the right time to take them in?
It's tough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, especially after hearing this part.
So it is tough, but I will say kids tend to be very honest with their actions, okay? Mm-hmm. There's even, if we kind of step back and take a look at this overall idea of kids kind of being honest with their reactions, if you think of something a fairly common injury called a toddler's fracture, which is in toddlers, you have this spiral fracture in your tibia. Very traditionally, what you would have done to treat this is put a big old cast on the leg. Makes it very difficult for diaper changes because the cast usually comes up all the way to the leg. Makes it very difficult on the parents trying to get this kid around, put them in strollers, all this kind of stuff. And more recently, what we've started doing is instead of this whole cast, you can get away with a little boot on the ankle and the foot, which honestly, they're really cute little boots.
Well, anything associated with toddler is going to be difficult.
Right.
So it's just
yes.
like that toddler, it's called that. You're
Yeah.
like, okay, you're in for it.
But even nowadays, what you'll see is that if they're not tolerating the boot at all, if they're like, get this thing off of me, you can allow them to just modify their own weight bearing. These toddlers will modify their own activity because they're having pain when they do certain things, and they will avoid those things.
I'm assuming, though, if your toddler wants to take its boot off, check with your doctor first.
Yes.
Don't
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. These will be coming as recommendations from your physician, right? Yeah. But all that to say, it's certainly in teenagers who are more rambunctious, it's harder to, sometimes they try to hide some things, right? But generally, if you see somebody limping when they're doing a certain activity, if you see that every day when they come home from school, they're sitting on the couch and they're rubbing their ankle, they're rubbing their leg, or they're like, moaning and groaning, that tells you that something's going on that you need.
And so where should parents, when something like that happens, where are the first kind of places? Should you see your pediatrician first? Should you immediately go to the emergency room? What are kind of the steps parents should take?
Yeah, again, I think the threshold for the emergency room is if you have an acute type of injury where you have this big injury that happens and somebody is not able to put weight on it. If you see color change, if you feel like the foot is getting cold, if you see those types of concerning symptoms, right? These are scary things.
Out.
Yeah.
A
lot of times with the ER, the trip to the ER, I feel like is a lot more when you see it, you know it.
We go through this with pickleball all the time.
Dr. Phillip Bucky Ribbeck is a sports medicine physician within Texas Children's Hospital Orthopedics and Sports Medicine Department. Dr. Ribbeck, thank you so much for joining us on Hello Houston.
Thanks for having me.
And that brings us to the end of our show. We want to thank you for listening, commenting, chatting with us right here on Hello Houston. We'll be back tomorrow with more conversations. This is News 88.7.
Thanks for listening to Hello Houston. Join us every Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. to talk all things Houston. The Hello Houston production team includes Garrett Bowman, William Menjivar, Jen Altide, Todd Holslander, and Jim Kovacic. For the latest in local news, subscribe to the Hello Houston daily newsletter at houstonpublicmedia.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by the guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media. This is News 88.7.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Certa Pro Painters, offering residential and commercial painting services, from color consultations to full project management.